All right. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Welcome. I hope you guys are ready. I have been dying to dive back into the book. That's the problem with me in books. I start reading one and I'm ready to just devour the whole thing and not stop. So rather than continue reading on my own and then you guys are being left a little behind in the story, I figured I would just go ahead and crank up another stream real quick. So, throw this on your second screen. Turn the volume to a cozy level. Whatever you got to do. As we are going to dive right on in, pull up, take a load off. Let's enjoy a little quiet Douglas Adams. And so, we will get our Just Chatting screen up. And we will dive right on in. Right where we left off at. I was tossing around whether or not to do like recaps before we start reading. But you know what? The VODs are out there. You can always go and watch the previous VOD and then step right into this one. So, with that said, Chapter 6. Howl, howl, gurgle, howl. Gargle, howl, howl, howl. Gargle, howl. Gargle, howl, howl. Gargle, howl. Howl, howl, gargle, howl. Gargle, howl. Should have a good time. Message repeats. This is your captain speaking, so stop whatever it is you're doing and pay attention. First of all, I see from our instruments that we have a couple of hitchhikers aboard. Hello, wherever you are. I just want to make it totally clear that you are not at all welcome. I worked hard to get what I am today, and I didn't become a captain of a Vogon construction ship simply to turn it into a taxi service for a load of degenerate freeloaders. I have sent out a search party, and as soon as they find you, I will put you off the ship. If you are very lucky, I might read to you some of my poetry first. Secondly, we are about to make the jump into hyperspace for our journey to Bernard Star. On arrival, we will stay in dock for a 72-hour retrofit. And no one is to leave the ship during that time. I repeat, all planet leave is cancelled. I've just had an unhappy love affair, and I don't see why anyone else should have a good time. Message ends. The noise stopped. Arthur discovered to his embarrassment that he was lying, curled up in a small ball on the floor, with his arms wrapped around his head. He smiled weakly. Charming man, he said. I wish I had a daughter, so I could forbid her from marrying one. You wouldn't need to, said Ford. They've got about as much sex appeal as a road accident. Now don't move, he added as Arthur began to uncurl himself. You'd better be prepared for a jump into hyperspace. It's unpleasant. Like being drunk. What's so unpleasant about being drunk? You asked a glass of water. Arthur thought about this. Ford, he said. Yeah. What's this fish doing in my ear? It's translating for you. It's a babblefish. Look it up in the book if you like. He tossed over the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and then curled himself up into a fetal ball to prepare himself for the jump. At that moment, the bottom fell out of Arthur's mind. His eyes turned inside out. His feet began to leak out of the top of his head. The room folded flat around him, spun around, shifted out of existence, and left him sliding into his own navel. They were passing through hyperspace. The Babelfish, said the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy quietly, is a small, yellow, and leech-like, and probably the oddest thing in the universe. It feeds on brainwave energy received not from its own carrier, but from those around it. It absorbs all the unconscious mental frequencies from this brainwave energy to nourish itself with. It then excretes into the mind of its carrier a telepathic matrix formed by combining the conscious thought frequencies with nerve signals picked up from the speech centers of the brain which has supplied them. The practical upshot of all of this is that if you stick a Babelfish in your ear, you can instantly understand anything said to you in any form of any language. The speech patterns you actually hear decode the brain matrix, which has been fed into your mind by your Babelfish. Now, it is such a bizarrely improbable coincidence that anything so mind-bogglingly useful could have evolved purely by chance that some thinkers have chosen to see it as the final and clinching proof of the non-existence of God. The argument goes something like this. I refuse to prove that I exist, says God, for proof denies faith, and without faith I am nothing. But, says man, the Babelfish is a dead giveaway, isn't it? It could not have evolved by chance. It proves you exist, and so therefore, by your own arguments, you do not. QED. Oh dear, said God, I hadn't thought of that, and promptly vanishes in a puff of logic. Oh, that was easy, said man, and for an encore goes on to prove that black is white and gets himself killed on the next zebra crossing. Most leading theologians claim that this argument is a load of dingo's kidneys. But that didn't stop Ulan Kulpit making a small fortune when it was used as the central theme of his best-selling book. Well, that about wraps it up for God. Meanwhile, the poor Babelfish, by effectively removing all barriers to communication between different races and cultures, has caused more bloodier wars than anything else in the history of creation. Arthur let out a low groan. He was horrified to discover that the kick through hyperspace hadn't killed him. He was now 6 light years from the place that Earth would have been if it still existed. The Earth. Visions of it swam sickeningly through his nauseated mind. There was no way his imagination could feel the impact of the whole of Earth having gone. It was simply too big. He prodded his feelings by thinking that his parents and his sister had gone. No reaction. He thought of all the people he had been close to. No reaction. He thought of a complete stranger he had been standing behind in the queue at the supermarket 2 days before and felt a sudden stab. The supermarket was gone. Everyone in it was gone. Nelson's column had gone. Nelson's column had gone, and there would be no outcry because there was no one left to make an outcry. From now on, Nelson's column only existed in the mind, in his mind. England only existed in his mind. His mind. Stuck there in this dank, smelly, steel-lined spaceship, a wave of claustrophobia closed in on him. England no longer existed. He'd got that. Somehow he'd got it. He tried again. America, he thought, has gone. He couldn't grasp it. He decided to start smaller again. New York was gone. No reaction. He'd never seriously believed it existed anyways. The dollar, he thought, has sunk forever. Slight tremor there. Every Bogart movie has been wiped, he said to himself, and that gave him a nasty knock. McDonald's, he thought. There is no longer any such thing as a McDonald's hamburger. He passed out. When he came around a second later, he found he was sobbing for his mother. He jerked himself violently to his feet. "Ford!" Ford looked up from where he was sitting in a corner, humming to himself. He always found the actual traveling through space part of space traveling rather trying. "Yeah?" he said. "If you're a researcher on this book thing and you were on Earth, you must have gathered some material on it." "Well, I was there. I was able to extend the entry by a bit, yeah." "Let me see what you've got. What it says in this edition, then. I've got to see it." "Yeah, okay." And he passed it over. Arthur grabbed a hold of it and tried to stop his hands from shaking. He pressed the entry for the relevant page. The screen flashed and swirled, resolving into a page of print. Arthur stared at it. "It doesn't have an entry," he burst out. Ford looked over his shoulder. "Yeah, it does," he said. "Down there, at the bottom of the screen, just above Eccentrica Galambits, the triple-breasted whore of Erotica 6. Arthur followed Ford's finger and saw where it was pointing. For a moment, it still didn't register. Then his mind nearly blew up. "What? Harmless? Is that all it's got to say? Harmless? One word?" Ford shrugged. "Well, there are about 100 billion stars in the galaxy and only a limited amount of space in the books as microprocessors. And no one knew much about Earth, of course." "Well, for God's sakes, I hope you managed to rectify that a bit." "Oh, yeah. Well, I managed to transmit a new entry off to the editor. He had to trim it a bit, but it's still an improvement." "And what does it say now?" asked Arthur. "Mostly harmless," admitted Ford with a slight embarrassing cough. "Mostly harmless?" shouted Arthur. "What was that noise?" hissed Ford. "It was me shouting," shouted Arthur. "No, shut up," said Ford. "I think we're in trouble." "You think we're in trouble?" Outside the door were the clear sounds of marching footsteps. "The Dendrasi?" whispered Arthur. "No. Those are steel-tipped boots," said Ford. There was a sharp ringing rap on the door. "Then who is it?" said Arthur. "Well," said Ford, "if we're lucky, it's just the Vogons come to throw us out into space." "And if we're unlucky?" "If we're unlucky," said Ford grimly, "the captain might be serious in his threat that he's going to read to us his poetry first." Welcome on in, Wars. Welcome on in. We just got through chapter 6. We are on to chapter 7. Yes, you missed the music. We are on the other side of the music. We have gone through chapter 6. We are now on chapter 7. Well, that's easy to do. Yes, there was a dancing Pikachu up there. I saw that. All right. Chapter 7. Vogon poetry is, of course, the third worst in the universe. The second worst is that of the Asgoths of Kree. During a recitation by their poet master, Grunthus the Flatulent, of his poem, Ode to a Small Lump of Green Putty I Found in My Armpit One Midsummer's Morning, 4 of his audience died of internal hemorrhaging, and the president of the Mid-Galactic Arts Nobbling Council survived by gnawing off one of his own legs. Grunthus is reported to have been disappointed by the poem's reception, and was about to embark on reading his 12-book epic entitled My Favorite Bath Time Gargles, when his own major intestines, in a desperate attempt to save life and civilization, leapt up through his neck and throttled his brain. The very worst poetry of all perished along with its creator, Paula Nancy Millstone Jennings of Greenbridge, Essex, England, in the destruction of planet Earth. Prostetnik Vogan-Jeltz smiled very, very slowly. This was done not so much as an effect as because he was trying to remember the sequence of muscle movements. He had a terrible therapeutic yell at his prisoners and was now feeling quite relaxed and ready for a little callousness. Yes, Allie, we are in the Hitchhiker's Guide. This is Chapter 7. Pull up a chair. Come listen. The prisoners sat in poetry appreciation chairs, strapped in. Vogan suffered no illusions as to the regard of their works were generally held in. Their early attempts at compositions had been part of a bludgeoning insistence that they be accepted as properly evolved, cultured race. But now the only thing that kept them going was sheer bloody mindlessness. The sweat stood out cold on Ford Prefect's brow and slid around the electrodes strapped to his temples. These were attached to a battery of electronic equipment, imagery intensifiers, rhythmic modulators, alliterative residulators, and simile dumpers, all designed to heighten the experience of the poem and make sure that not a single nuance of the poet's thought was lost. Arthur Dent sat and quivered. He had no idea what he was in for, but he knew he hadn't liked anything that had happened so far, and didn't think things were very likely to change. The Vogan began to read a fetid little passage of his own devising. "Oh, fatal grunt bubbly," he began. Spasms racked for his body. This was worse than even he had been prepared for. "Thy Mycterians are to me as a flural gerbil fluralops on a lurgid bee." "Ah!" went Ford Prefect, wrenching his head back as lumps of pain stumped through it. He could dimly see beside him Arthur lolling and rolling in his seat. He clenched his cheeks. "Grip, I implore thee," continued the merciless Vogan. "My thunting, twirling gurgleflurps." His voice was rising to a horrible pitch of impassioned stridency. "And hoopchis, draggle me with crinkle blurg flurgles, or I will rend thee in gobbleworts with blurgle flurgipes. See if I don't." Cried Ford Prefect, and threw one final spasm as the electrode's enhancements of the last line caught him full blast across the temple. He went limp. Arthur lulled. "Now, Earthlings," whirred the Vogan. He didn't know that Ford Prefect was in fact from a small planet somewhere in the vicinity of Betelgeuse. He wouldn't have cared if he had. "I present with you a simple choice. Either die in the vacuum of space, or..." He paused for melodramatic effect. "Tell me how good you thought my poem was." He threw himself backwards into a huge leather bat-shaped seat and watched him. He did smile again. Ford was rasping for breath. He rolled his dusty tongue around in his parched mouth and moaned. Arthur said brightly, I actually quite liked it." Ford turned and gasped. Here was an approach that had quite simply not occurred to him. The Vogon raised a surprised eyebrow that effectively obscured his nose, and therefore, no bad thing. "Oh, good," he whirred in considerable astonishment. "Oh, yeah," said Arthur. "I thought that some of the metaphysical imagery was really particularly effective." Ford continued to stare at him, slowly organizing his thoughts around this totally new concept. Were they really going to be able to bareface their way out of this? "Yes, do continue," invited the Vogon. "Oh, and interesting rhythmic devices too," continued Arthur, "which seem to counterpoint he floundered. Ford leapt in to his rescue, hazarding, "The counterpoint, the surrealism of the underlying metaphor of the He floundered too, but Arthur was right again. "Humanity, voganity," Ford hissed at him. "Oh, yes. The voganity, of the poet's compassionate soul." Arthur felt he was on a home stretch now, "which contrives through the medium of the verse structure to sublimate this, transcend that, and come to terms with the fundamental dichotomies of the other." He was reaching a triumphant crescendo. "And one is left with this profound and vivid insight into which suddenly gave out on him. Ford leapt in with the coup de grace. "Into whatever it was the poem was about," he yelled out of the corner of his mouth. "Well done, Arthur. That was really good." Vogon perused him for a moment. Embittered racial soul had been touched, but he thought, no, too little, too late. "Hi, boy. It's going well. We are enjoying a good book tonight." His voice took on the quality of a cat snagging brushed nylon. "So, what you're saying is that I write poetry because underneath my callous, heartless exterior, I really just want to be loved," he said. "Is that right?" Ford laughed. A nervous little laugh. "Well, I mean," he said, "don't we all deep down, Vogon stood up. "No. Well, you're completely wrong," he said. "I just write poetry to throw my mean, callous, heartless exterior into sharp relief. I'm going to throw you off my ship now. Anyways, guards, take away the prisoners to number 3 airlock and throw them out." "What?" shouted Ford. A huge young Vogon guard stepped forward, yanked them out of their straps with his huge blubbery arms. "You can't throw us out into space," yelled Ford. "We're trying to write a book." "Resistance is useless," shouted the Vogon guard back at him. It was the first phrase he had learned when he joined the Vogon Guard Corps. The captain watched with detached amusement and then turned away. Arthur stared around wildly. "I don't want to die now," he yelled. "I still got a headache, and I don't want to go to heaven with a headache. I'd be all cross, and I wouldn't enjoy it." The guard grasped them both firmly round the neck, bowing deferentially towards the captain's back, and hoisted them, both protesting, out of the bridge. A steel door closed, and the captain was on his own again. He hummed quietly, mused to himself, lightly fingering his notebook verses. He said, "Counterpoint to the surrealism of the underlying metaphor." He continued this for a moment and closed the book with a grim smile. "Death's too good for them." The long steel line corridor echoed to the feeble struggles of the two humanoids clamped firmly under rubbery Vogon armpits.
"This is great," spluttered Arthur. "This is really terrific. Let go of me, you brute."
The Vogon guard dragged him on.
"Don't you worry,"
said Ford.
"I'll think of something."
He didn't sound hopeful.
"Resistance is useless,"
bellowed the guard.
"Just don't say things like that," stammered Ford. "How can anyone be positive and maintain a positive attitude if you're saying things like that?" "My God," complained Arthur. "You're talking about a positive mental attitude and you haven't even had your planet demolished today. I woke up this morning and thought I was having a nice, relaxed day. Do a bit of reading, brush the dog. It's now just after 4 in the afternoon and I'm already being thrown out of an alien spaceship 6 light years from the smoking remains of Earth."
He spluttered and gargled as the Vogon tightened his grip.
"All right," said Ford. "Just stop panicking." "Who said anything about panicking?" snapped Arthur. "This is still just a culture shock. You wait till I settle down into the situation and found my bearings. Then I'll really start to panic." "Arthur, you're getting hysterical. Shut up."
Ford tried desperately to think, but was interrupted by the guard shouting again.
"Resistance is useless."
"And you can just shut up as well,"
snapped Ford.
"Resistance is useless."
"Oh, give it a rest," said Ford. He twisted his head till he was looking straight up at his captor's face.
A thought struck him.
"Do you really enjoy this sort of thing?"
Yes, suddenly. The Vogon stopped dead. A look of immense stupidity seeped slowly over his face.
"Enjoy?"
he boomed.
"What do you mean?"
"What I mean,"
said Ford,
"is does it give you a full, satisfying life? Stomping around, shouting, pushing people out of spaceships?"
The Vogon stared up at the low steel ceiling, his eyebrows almost rolling over each other. His mouth slacked. Finally, he said,
"Well, the hours are good."
"They'd have to be,"
agreed Ford. Arthur twisted his head around to look at Ford.
"Ford, what are you doing?"
he asked in an amazed whisper.
"Oh, just trying to take an interest in the world around me, okay? So the hours are pretty good then."
The Vogon stared down at him. His sluggish thoughts mulled around in the murky depths.
"Yeah,"
he said.
"But come to think of it, most of the actual minutes are pretty lousy. Except,"
he thought again, which required looking at the ceiling.
"Except some of the shouting. I quite like the shouting."
He filled his lungs and bellowed,
"Resistance is..."
"Yeah, okay, sure," interrupted Ford. "You're good at that. I can tell. But mostly lousy," he said, slowly giving the words time to reach their mark. "Then why do you do it? What is it? The girls? The leather? The machismo? Or do you just find that coming to terms with the mindless tedium of it all is present in an interesting challenge?"
Arthur looked backwards, forwards, and between them, completely baffled.
Said the guard. I don't know. I think I just sort of do, really. My aunt said the spaceship guard was a good career for a young Vogon, The uniform, the low-slung stun rehearster, the mindless tedium.
"There you are, Arthur," said Ford with the air of someone reaching the conclusion of his argument. "You think you got problems." Arthur rather thought he had. Apart from the unpleasant business with his home planet, the Vogon guard had half throttled him already, and he didn't like the sound of being thrown into space very much. Try and understand his problem, insisted Ford. Here he is, poor lad. His entire life's work is stomping around, throwing people off spaceships.
And shouting,
added the guard. And shouting, sure, said Ford, patting the blubbery arm, clamping around his neck as in friendly condolences or condescension. And he doesn't even know why he's doing it. Arthur agreed. This was very sad. He did this with a small, feeble gesture because he was just too asphyxiated to speak. Deep rumblings of amusement come from the guard.
Well, now that you put it like that, I suppose.
Good lad, encouraged Ford.
But, all right,
went on the rumbling.
So, what is the alternative?
Well, said Ford brightly, but slowly. Stop doing it. Of course. Tell them. Tell them you're not going to do it anymore. He felt he ought to add something to that, but for the moment, the guard seemed to have his mind occupied pondering that.
Well, that doesn't sound great to me.
Ford suddenly felt the moment slipping away. Now, wait a minute, he said. That's just the start. You see, there's more to it than that. You see, but at that moment, the guard renewed his grip, continued his original purpose of lugging his prisoners to the airlock. He was obviously quite touched. No, I
think it's all the same to you,
he said.
I'd better get back to both shoving you into this airlock and then go on and get about with some of the other bits of shouting I got to do.
It wasn't all the same to Ford Prefect at all. Come on now, but look, he said, slowly, less brightly. Said Arthur without any clear inflection. But hang on, pursued Ford. There's music and art and things to you like that. Tell them about it.
Resistance is useless,
bellowed the guard, and then added,
You see, if I keep it up, I can eventually get promoted to senior shouting officer. And there aren't usually many vacancies for non-shouting, non-pushing people about officers. So I think I will stick to what I know.
They now had reached the airlock, a large circular steel hatch of massive strength and weight let into the inner skin of the aircraft. The guard operated a control, and the hatchway swung smoothly open.
But thanks for taking an interest,
said the Vogon guard.
Bye now.
He flung Ford and Arthur through the hatchway into the small chamber within. Arthur lay panting for breath. Ford scrambled round and flung his shoulder uselessly against the reclosing hatch. Roden, these are all being saved to VODs. You can just download the VOD. But listen, he shouted to the guard. There's a whole world you don't know about here. How about this? Desperately, he grabbed for the only bit of culture he knew offhand. He hummed the first few bars of Beethoven's Fifth. Da-da-da-dum. Doesn't that stir anything in you?
No,
said the guard.
Not really. But I'll mention it to my aunt.
If he said anything further after that, it was lost. The hatchway sealed itself tight, and all the sound was lost except for the faint, distant hum of the ship's engines. They were in a bright, polished, cylindrical chamber about 6 feet in diameter and 10 feet long. Ford looked around it, panting. Potentially bright lad, I thought, he said, and slumped against the curved wall. Arthur was still lying in the curved floor where he had fallen. He didn't look up. He just lay, panting. We're trapped now, aren't we? Yeah, said Ford. We're trapped. Well, I don't think... Well, didn't you think of anything? I thought you said you were going to think of something. Perhaps you thought of something and you didn't notice. Oh, yeah, I thought of something, panted Ford.
Arthur looked up expectantly.
But unfortunately,
Continued Ford.
it rather involved being on the other side of the airlock hatchway.
He kicked the hatch that they had just been thrown through.
But it was a good idea, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. Very neat.
What was it? Well, I hadn't worked out the details yet. Not much point now, is there?
So, what happens next? Asked Arthur.
Oh, well, the hatchway in front of us will open automatically in a few moments, and we'll shoot out into space, and I expect to asphyxiate. If you take a lungful of air with you, you can last for up to 30 seconds, of course,
said Ford. He stuck his hands behind his back, raised his eyebrows, and started to hum an old Beetlegeusean battled hymn. To Arthur's eyes, he suddenly looked very, very alien.
So this is it,
said Arthur.
We are going to die. Yep,
said Ford.
Except, no, wait, I got it. Wait a moment. He suddenly leaped across the chamber at something behind Arthur's line of vision. What's this switch? He cried. What? Where?
Arthur twisted round.
No, I was only fooling. We're going to die after all.
He slumped against the wall and carried on the tune from where he left.
You know,
said Arthur,
it's times like this when I'm trapped in the Vogon airlock with a man from Beetlejuice and about to die of asphyxiation in deep space that I really wish I had listened to what my mother told me when I was young. Why? What did she tell you? I don't know. I didn't listen. Oh, this is terrific, Arthur thought to himself. Nelson Column has gone, McDonald's has gone, and all that's left is me and the words mostly harmless. Any second now, all that will be left is mostly harmless. And yesterday, the planet seemed to be going so well.
A motor whirred. A slight hiss built into a deafening roar of rushing air as the outer hatchway opened into the empty blackness, studded with tiny, impossibly bright points of light. Ford and Arthur popped out into outer space like corks fired from a toy gun. Okay. I'm going to take 2 seconds before we start chapter 8 to say hi to everybody who has showed up. You're here for A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We are enjoying a quiet little book together, and you're welcome to continue to listen, to put it in the background and just have something to listen to. If you're curious about what has happened before and now, we started chapter 6 in the stream tonight, so chapters 1 through 5 will be on the VOD from last Sunday. So if you want to catch up with the story, that would be how you would do it. Sorry, I needed a drink. And welcome on in, Crow. I saw you pop in. And Egg Boy, I think I said hello to you. And Allie, hi, happy to have you here. And of course, there's Wars and Swift and Lord Roden. Welcome on in. Well, I'm glad you were enjoying the page turners. I'm doing all right. We started this up on last Sunday. A couple of friends of mine were like, we would like for you to read us a book to go to sleep to. And so we started this book on last Sunday, and we will be doing that every Sunday. I wanted to read more of the story. I'd left off at a point where I was like, I know what's happening next, but I just want to get to it. So. Well, Wars, I will let you and Kino hash that one out. I am staying out of that one. All right. And, well, Crow, if you can go back to bed, you're more than welcome to.
All right. I think we've said hi to everybody who's popped in. So with that, let's get right back into it. Chapter 8. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a wholly remarkable book. It has been compiled and recompiled many times over, many years and under many different editorialships. It contains contributions from countless numbers of travelers and researchers. The introduction begins like this. Space, it says, is big, really big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big it is. I mean, you may think it's a long way down the road to the chemist, but that is just peanuts to space. Listen, and so on. After a while, the style settles down a bit and begins to tell you things you really need to know, like the fact that the fabulously beautiful planet Bethselium is now so worried about the cumulative erosion by 10 billions of visiting tourists a year that any net imbalance between the amount you eat and the amount you excrete while on the planet is surgically removed from your body weight when you leave. So every time you go to the lavatory there, it is vitally important to get a receipt. To be fair, when confronted by the sheer enormity of the distances between the stars, better minds than the one responsible for the guide's introduction have faltered. Some invite you to consider for a moment a peanut in Reading and a small walnut in Johannesburg, and other such dizzying concepts. The simple truth is that interstellar distances will not fit into the human imagination. Even light, which travels so fast that it takes most races thousands of years to realize that it travels at all times, takes time to journey between the stars. It takes 8 minutes to journey from the star Sol to the place where the Earth used to be. 4 years more to arrive at Sol's nearest stellar neighbor, Alpha Proxima. For light to reach the other side of the galaxy, for it to reach Demogran, for instance, takes rather longer, 500,000 years. The record for hitchhiking this distance is just under 5 years, but you don't get to see much of the galaxy that way. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy says that if you hold a lungful of air, you can survive in the total vacuum of space for about 30 seconds. However, it goes on to say that with space being the mind-bogglingly size that it is, the chances of getting picked up by another ship within those 30 seconds are 2 to the power of 276,709 to 1 against being picked up. By a total staggering coincidence, this is also the telephone number of an Islington flat where Arthur once went to a very good party and met a very nice girl whom he totally failed to get it off with. She went off with a gatecrasher. Though the planet Earth, the Islington flat, and the telephone have all now been demolished, it is comforting to reflect that they are all, in some small ways, commemorated by the fact that 29 seconds later, Ford and Arthur were rescued. So the other nice thing about this book is very short chapters. So it makes it easy to stop and say hi. And yeah, I guess it is morning. So good morning, Crow and Wars. Chapter 9. A computer clattered to itself in alarm as it noticed an airlock open and close itself for no apparent reason. This was because Reason was in fact out to lunch. A hole had just appeared in the galaxy. It was exactly a nothing of a second long
a nothing of an inch wide and quite a lot of millions of light years from end to end. As it closed up, lots of paper hats and party balloons fell out of it and drifted off through the universe. A team of 7 3-foot-high market analysts fell out of it and died, partly of asphyxiation, partly of surprise. 239,000 lightly fried eggs fell out of it too, materializing in large, wobbly heap on the famine-struck land of Pogfrin in the Pansil system. The whole Pogrim tribe had died out from famine except for one last man who died of cholesterol poisoning some weeks later. The nothing of a second for which the whole existed reverberated backwards and forwards through time in a most improbable fashion. Somewhere in the deeply remote past, it seriously traumatized a small, random group of atoms drifting through the empty sterility of space and made them cling together in the most extraordinary and unlikely patterns. Those patterns quickly learned to copy themselves. This was part of what was so extraordinary about the pattern. It went on to cause massive trouble on every planet they drifted onto. This was how life began in the universe. 5 wild event maelstroms swirled in vicious storms of unreason and spewed up on a pavement. On the pavement lay Ford Prefect and Arthur Dent, gulping like half-spent fish.
"There you are,"
gasped Ford, scrambling for a finger's hold on the pavement as it raced through the third reach of the unknown.
"I told you I'd think of something."
"Oh, sure," said Arthur. "Sure."
"Bright idea of mine," said Ford. "Find a passing spaceship and get rescued by it."
The real universe arched sickeningly away from beneath them. Various pretend ones flitted silently by like mountain goats, primal lights exploding, splattering space-time as goblets of jello. Time blossom, matter shrank away. The highest prime number coalesced quietly in the corner and hid itself away forever.
"Oh, come off it,"
said Arthur.
"The chances against it were astronomical." "Don't knock it. It worked," said Ford.
"What sort of spaceship are we in?" asked Arthur, as the pit of eternity yawned beneath him.
"I don't know,"
said Ford.
"I haven't opened my eyes yet."
"Nor have I," said Arthur. The universe jumped, froze, quivered, and splayed in several unexpected directions. Arthur and Ford opened their eyes and looked about it in considerable surprise.
"Good God,"
said Arthur.
"It looks like the seafront at the south end." "Hell, I'm relieved to hear you say that."
"Why?"
"Because I thought I must be going mad."
"Perhaps you are. Perhaps you only thought I said that." Ford thought about this.
"Well, did you say that or didn't you?"
"I think so," replied Arthur.
"Well, perhaps we're both going mad."
"Yeah," said Arthur. "We'd be mad, all things considered, to think this was South End."
"Well, do you think it is South End?"
"Oh, yeah."
"So do I. Therefore, we must be mad."
"Nice day for it."
"Yeah,"
said a passing maniac. "Who is that?" asked Arthur.
"Who? The man with 5 heads and the elderberry bush falling out of his kippers?"
"Yeah."
"I don't know. Just somebody."
"Ah." They both sat on the pavement and watched with a certain unease as huge children bounced heavily along the sand and wild horses thundered through the sky, taking fresh supplies of reinforced railings to the uncertain areas. "You know," said Arthur, with a slight cough,
"if this is South End, there's something very odd about it." "You mean the way the sea stays steady as a rock and the buildings keep washing up and down?"
said Ford.
Yeah, I thought it was odd too. In fact,
He continued, with a huge bang, Southend split itself into 6 equal segments, which danced and spun giddily around each other in lewd and lascivious formations. There's something altogether very strange going on. Wild yelling noises of pipes and strings seared through the wind. Hot donuts popped out of the road for 10 pence each. Horrid fish stormed out of the sky, and Arthur and Ford decided to make a run for it. They plunged through heavy walls of sound, mountains of archaic thoughts, valleys of mood music, bad shoe sessions, footling bats, and suddenly heard a girl's voice. It sounded quite sensible voice, but it just said, 2 to the power of 100,000 to 1 against and falling. And that was all. Ford skidded down a beam of light and spun around to try and find the source of the voice, but could see nothing he could seriously believe in.
What was that voice? Said Arthur. I don't know, yelled Ford. I don't know. It sounded like a measurement of probability.
Probability? What do you mean?
Probability, you know, like 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 5 to 4 against. It said 2 to the power of 100,000 to 1 against. That's a pretty improbable, you know.
A million gallon vat of custard upended itself over them without warning.
But what does it mean?
Cried Arthur.
What, the custard?
No, the measures of improbability.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know at all. I think we're on some kind of spaceship.
I can only assume that this is not the first-class compartments. Bulges appeared in the fabric of space-time. Great, ugly bulges. Said Arthur as he felt his body softening and bending in unusual directions. Southend seems to be melting away. The stars are swirling. A dust bowl. My legs are drifting off into the sunset. My left arm's come off too. A frightened thought struck him. Hell, he said. How am I going to operate my digital watch now? He wound his eyes desperately around in Ford's direction.
Ford, he said, you're turning into a penguin. Stop it.
Again came the voice. 2 to the power of 75,000 to 1 against and falling. Ford waddled around his pawn in a furious circle.
Hey, who are you? He quacked. Where are you? What's going on? Is there any way of stopping it?
Please relax, said the voice pleasantly, like a stewardess in an airliner with only 1 wing and 2 engines, which is on fire. You are perfectly safe.
But that's not the point, raged Ford. The point is now I'm a perfectly safe penguin, and my colleague there is rapidly running out of limbs.
It's all right. I've got them back now. And I just did that all wrong, said Arthur. 2 to the power of 50,000 to 1 against and falling, said the voice. Admittedly, said Arthur. They're longer than I usually like them, but...
Isn't there anything,
squawked Ford in avian form,
you feel you ought to be telling us?
The voice cleared its throat. A giant petite four lolloped off into the distance. Welcome to the starship Heart of Gold. The voice continued. Please do not be alarmed by anything you see or hear around you. You are bound to feel some initial ill effects, as you have been rescued from certain death at an improbability level of 2 to the power of 276,000 to 1 against, possibly much higher. We are now cruising at a level of 2 to the power of 25,000 to 1 against and falling, and we will be restoring normality just as soon as we are sure what is normal anyways. Thank you. 2 to the power of 20,000 to 1 against and falling. The voice cut out. Ford and Arthur were in a small, luminous pink cubicle. Ford was wildly excited.
Arthur, he said, this is fantastic. We've been picked up by a ship powered by an infinite improbability drive. This is incredible. I've heard rumors about it. They were all officially denied, but they must have done it. They must have built the improbability drive. Arthur, what's happening?
Arthur had jammed himself against the door of the cubicle, trying to hold it closed. It was ill-fitting. Tiny, furry little hands were squeezing themselves through the crack, their fingers ink-stained, tiny voices chattering insanely. Arthur looked up. Ford, he said, there's an infinite number of monkeys outside who want to talk to us about this script Hamlet that they've been working on. Good stuff. Good book. Chapter 10. The infinite improbability drive is a wonderful new method of crossing vast interstellar distances in a mere nothingness of a second, without all of that tedious mucking about in hyperspace. It was discovered by a lucky chance and then developed into a governable form of propulsion by the Galactic Government's research team on Demigron. This briefly is the story of its discovery. The principles of generating small amounts of finite improbability by simply hooking the logic circuits of a Bumbleweenie 57 sub-Mason brain to an atomic vector plotter suspended in a strong Brownian motion producer, say a nice hot cup of tea, were of course well understood, and such generators were often used to break the ice at parties by making all the molecules in the hostess's undergarments leap simultaneously 1 foot to the left in accordance with the theories of interdeterminacy. Many respectable physicists said that they weren't going to stand for this party, partly because it was a debasement of science, but mostly because they didn't get invited to those sorts of parties. Another thing they couldn't stand was the perpetual failure they encountered in trying to construct a machine which could generate infinite improbability field needed to flip a spaceship across the mind-paralyzing distances between the farthest stars, and in the end they grumpily announced that such a machine was virtually impossible. Then one day, a student who'd been left to sweep up the lab after a particularly unsuccessful party found himself reasoning this way. If, he thought to himself, such a machine is a virtual impossibility, then it must logically be a finite improbability. So all we have to do in order to make one is to work out exactly how improbable it is, feed that figure into a finite improbability generator, give it a fresh cup of really hot tea, and turned it on. He did this and was rather startled to discover that he had managed to create the long sought after golden infinite improbability generator out of thin air. It startled him even more when, just after he was awarded the Galactic Institute's prize for extreme cleverness, he got lynched by a rampaging mob of respectable physicists who had finally realized that the one thing they really couldn't stand was a smartass. I love these little deviations in the story that comes with this book. It's a fantastic thing. All right. Smart ass. Yeah, right? One thing we can't stand, a smart ass. Let's see where we at. Oh, we're only halfway through the stream. That's not too bad. We are on a good pace. All right. You ready? Chapter 11. The improbability-proof control cabin of the Heart of Gold looked like a perfectly conventional spaceship, except that it was perfectly clean because it was so new. Some of the control seats hadn't had the plastic wrappings taken off yet. The cabin was mostly white, oblong and about the size of a smallish restaurant. In fact, it wasn't perfectly oblong. The two long walls were raked around in a slightly parallel curve. And all the angles and corners of the cabin were contoured in excitingly chunky shapes. The truth of the matter is that it would have been a great deal simpler and more practical to build the cabin as an ordinary three-dimensional oblong room. But then the designers would have gotten miserable. As it was, the cabin looked excitingly purposeful, with a large video screen ranged over the controls and guidance system, panels on the concave wall, and long banks of computers set into the convex wall. In one corner, a robot sat humped, its gleaming brushed steel head hanging loosely between its gleaming brushed steel knees. It, too, was fairly new. But though it was a beautifully constructed and polished it, somehow looked as if the various parts of its more or less humanoid body didn't quite fit properly. In fact, they fitted perfectly well, but something in its bearings suggested that they might have fit a little better. Zaphod Beeblebrox paced nervously up and down the cabin, brushing his hands over pieces of gleaming equipment and giggling with excitement. Trillian sat hunched over a clump of instruments, reading off figures. Her voice was carried round the tannoy system of the whole ship. 5-1 against and falling, she said. 4-1 against and falling. 3-1, 2-1. Probability factor 1-1. We have normality. I repeat, we have normality. She turned her microphone off and turned it back on, and with a slight smile and continued, anything you can't cope with is therefore your own problem. Please relax. You will be sent for soon. Zaphod burst out in annoyance. Who are they, Trillian? Trillian just spun around to face him and shrugged. Just a couple of guys we seem to have picked up in open space. Section ZZ plural Z alpha. Yeah, well, very sweet, Trillian, complained Zaphod. But do you really think it's wise under the circumstance? I mean, here we are on the run and everything. We must have the police of half the galaxy after us now, and we stopped to pick up a couple of hitchhikers. Okay, so 10 out of 10 for style, but minus several million for good thinking. He tapped irritably on the control panel. Trillian quietly moved his hand before he tapped anything important. Whatever Zaphod's qualities of mind might include, dash, bravado, conceit, he was mechanically inept and could easily blow up the ship with an extravagant gesture. Trillian had come to suspect that the main reason he had such a wild and successful life was that he never really understood the significance of anything he did. Zaphod, she said patiently. They were floating unprotected in space. You wouldn't want them to have died, would you? Well, no, not as such. Not as such. Not die as such, but... Trillian cocked her head on one side. Well, maybe someone else might have picked them up later. A second later, and they would have died. Yeah, well, if you'd taken the trouble to think about the problem a bit longer, it would have gone away. You'd have been happy to let them die. Well, not happy as such, but... Anyways, said Trillian, turning back to the controls, I didn't pick them up. What do you mean? Who picked them up then? The ship did. Huh? The ship did, all by itself. Huh? While we were in the improbability drive. But that's incredible. No, Zaphod. Just very, very improbable. Yeah, okay. Look, Zaphod, she said, patting his arm. Don't worry about the aliens. They're just a couple of guys, I expect. I'll send a robot down to get them and bring them up and...
Bring them up here. Hey, Marvin.
In the corner, the robot's head swung around, but then wobbled about imperceptibly. It pulled itself up to its feet as if it was about 5 pounds heavier than it actually was, and made what an outside observer would have thought was a heroic effort to cross the room. It stopped in front of Trillian and seemed to stare through her left shoulder. I think, I'm feeling very depressed, it said, its voice low and hopeless.
Oh, God,
muttered Zaphod and slumped in his seat.
Well, said Trillian in a bright, compassionate tone, here's something to occupy and keep your mind off on things.
It won't work. I have an exceptionally large mind.
Marvin.
All right. What do you want me to do?
Go down to number 2 entry bay and bring the 2 aliens up here. Under surveillance.
With a micro pause and a finely calculated micromodulation of pitch and timbre, nothing you could actually take offense at, Marvin just managed to convey his utter contempt and horror of all things human.
Just that. Yes, Trillian said firmly. I won't enjoy it.
Zaphod leaned back in his chair.
She's not asking you to enjoy it. Just do it, will ya?
All right. And said Marvin, like the tolling of a great cracked bell, I'll do it.
Good. Great. Thank you.
Marvin turned and lifted his flat-topped triangular eyes up towards him. I'm not getting you down, am I? He said pathetically.
No, Marvin,
tilted Trillian.
This is just fine, really.
I wouldn't like to think that I was getting you down.
No, don't worry about it. You just act as comes natural and everything else will be just fine.
You're sure you don't mind?
No, Marvin. That's just fine, really, just part of life.
Marvin flashed her an electronic look.
Life. Don't talk to me about life.
He turned hopelessly on his heels, lugged himself out of the cabin with a satisfied hum and a click the door closed behind him.
I don't think I can stand that robot much longer,
growled Zaphod. All right, Crow. The Encyclopedia Galactica defines a robot as a mechanical apparatus designed to do the work of man. The marketing division of Sirius Cybernetics Corporation defines a robot as your plastic pal who's fun to be with. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy defines the marketing division of the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation as a bunch of mindless jerks who will be the first against the wall when the revolution comes, with a footnote to the effect that the editors would welcome applications from anyone interested in taking over the post of robotics correspondent. Curiously enough, an edition of the Encyclopedia Galactica that had the good fortune to fall through a time warp from 1,000 years in the future defined the marketing division of the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation as a bunch of mindless jerks who were the first against the wall when the revolution came. The pink cubicle had winked out of existence. The monkeys had sunk away to a better dimension. Ford and Arthur found themselves in the embarkment area of the ship. It was rather smart.
I think this ship's brand new,
said Ford.
How can you tell? Have you got some exotic device for measuring age of metal? No, I just found this sales brochure lying on the floor. It's a lot of the universe can be yours and stuff, and oh, look, I was right.
Ford jabbed at the page and showed it to Arthur.
It says, sensational new breakthrough in improbable physics. As soon as a ship's drive reaches infinite improbability, it passes through every point in the universe, be the envy of other major governments. Wow, this is a big leap stuff.
Ford hunted excitedly through the technical specs of the ship, occasionally gasping with astonishment at what he'd read. Clearly, galactic astrotechnology had moved ahead during the years of his exile. Arthur listened for a short while, being unable to understand the vast majority of what Ford was saying, and he began to let his mind wander. Trailing his fingers along the edge of an incomprehensible computer bank, he reached out and pressed an invitingly large red button on a nearby panel. The panel lit up with the words, "Please do not press this button again." He shook himself.
Listen,
said Ford, who was still engrossed in the sales pusher.
They make that a big thing of the ship cybernetics, a new generation of Sirius Cybernetics Corporation robots and computers with new GPP feature.
GPP feature? Said Arthur. What's that?
Oh, it's the genuine people personality.
Oh, said Arthur. Sounds ghastly. A voice behind him said, "It is." The voice was low and hopeless. Accompanied by a slightly clanking sound, they spun around and saw an abject steel man standing hunched in a doorway.
"What?"
they said. "Ghastly," continued Marvin. "It all is. Absolutely ghastly. Just don't ever talk about it. Look at this door." He stepped through it. The irony circuits cut in his voice modulators as he mimicked the style of the sales brochure. "All the doors on this spaceship have a wonderfully sunny disposition. It is their pleasure to open for you and their satisfaction to close again with the knowledge of a job well done." As the door closed behind them, it became apparent that it did indeed have a satisfied, sighing-like quality to it. It said. Marvin regarded it with a cold loathing, while his logic circuits chattered with disgust and tinkered with the concept of direct physical violence against it. Further circuits cut in, saying, "Why bother? What's the point? Nothing is worth getting involved in." Further circuits amused themselves by analyzing the molecular components of the door and of the humanoid brain cells. For a quick encore, they measured the level of hydrogen emissions in the surrounding cubic parsec of space and then shut down. Again, in boredom, a spasm of despair shook the robot's body as he turned around. "Come on," he droned. "I've been ordered to take you down to the bridge, and here I am. Brain size of a planet, and they asked me to take you down to the bridge. Call that a job satisfaction? Well, I don't." He turned and walked back to the hated door.
Excuse me,"
said Ford, following after him.
"Which government owns this ship?"
Marvin just ignored him. You watch this door," he murmured. "It's about to open again. I can tell by the intolerable air of smugness it generates." With an ingratiating little whine, the door slid open and Marvin stomped through. "Come on," he said. The others followed quickly, and the door slid back into place with pleased little clicks and whirs. "Thank you, Marketing Division of the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation," said Marvin as he trudged desolately up the gleaming curved corridors that stretched out before him. "Let's build robots with genuine people personalities." They said, "So they tried it out on me. I'm a personality prototype. Can you tell? You can, can't you?" Arthur and Ford muttered embarrassed little disclaimers. "I hate that door,"
continued Marvin. I'm not getting you down, am I? Which government? Started Ford again. No government owns it, snapped the robot. It's been stolen. Stolen? Stolen. Who by? Zaphod Beeblebrox. Something extraordinary happened to Ford's face. At least 5 entirely separate, distinctive expressions of shock and amazement piled up on it in a jumbled mess. His left leg, which was in mid-stride, seemed to have difficulty finding the floor again. He stared at the robot and tried to disentangle some deltoid muscles. Zaphod Beeblebrox? He asked weakly. Sorry, did I say something wrong? Said Marvin, dragging himself up regardless. Pardon me for breathing, which I never do anyways. So I don't know why I bothered to say it. Oh God, I'm so depressed. Here's another of those self-satisfying doors. Life, don't talk to me of life. No one even mentioned it, muttered Arthur irritably. Ford, are you all right? Ford just stared at him. Did that robot say Zaphod Beeblebrox? Ooh. All right. Chapter 12. A loud clatter of gunk music flooded through the heart of gold. As Zaphod searched the sub-ether radio wave bands for news of himself, the machine was rather difficult to operate. For years, radios had been operated by means of pressing buttons and turning dials, and then as technology became more sophisticated, the controls were made touch-sensitive. You merely had to brush the panel with your fingers now. Now all you have to do is wave your hand in the general direction of the component and hope. It saved a lot of muscular expenditure, of course. But it meant that you had to sit infuriatingly still if you wanted to keep listening to the same program. Zaphod waved his hand and the channel switched again. More gunk music. But this time it was background to a news announcement. The news was always heavily edited to fit the rhythms of the music. And the news reports brought to you here on the sub-ether waveband broadcast around the galaxy around the clock, squawked the voice. And we'll be saying a big hello to all the intelligent life forms everywhere and to everyone else out there. The secret is to bang the rocks together, guru guys. And of course, the big news story tonight is the sensational theft of the new Improbability Drive, prototype ship by none other than Galactic President Zaphod Beeblebrox. And questions everyone is asking, has the big Z finally flipped? Beeblebrox, the man who invented the pan-galactic gargle blaster, ex-confident trickster, once described by eccentric galambits as the best bang since the big one, and recently voted the worst-dressed sentient being in the known universe for 7th time, has he got an answer this time? We asked his previous brain care specialist, Greg Halfront. The music swirled and died for a moment, and another voice broke in, presumably Halfront. He said, well, Zaphod's just this guy, you know. But got no further because an electric pencil flew across the cabin through the radio's on and off sensitive airspace. Zaphod turned and glared at Trillian. She had thrown the president. Hey, he said. What did you do that for? Trillian was tapping her fingers on the screen of figures. I've just thought of something, she said. Yeah, well, interrupting a news bulletin about me for... You heard enough of yourself. I'm very insecure. We know that. Can we drop your ego for a moment? This is important. If there's anything more important than my ego around here, I want it caught and shot now. Zaphod glared at her again, then laughed. Listen, she said. We picked up those couple of guys. What couple of guys? The couple of guys we just picked up. Oh, yeah, those couple of guys. We picked them up in sector ZZ plural Z alpha. Yeah? Trillian said quietly, does that mean anything to you? ZZ plural Z alpha. ZZ plural Z alpha. ZZ plural Z alpha. Well, what does Z mean? Which one? Anyone. One of the major difficulties Trillian experienced in her relationship with Zaphod was learning to distinguish between him pretending to be stupid just to get people off their guard, pretending to be stupid because he couldn't be bothered to think and wanted somebody else to do it for him, pretending to be outrageously stupid to hide the fact that he actually didn't understand what was going on, and really being generally stupid. He was renowned for being amazingly clever, and quite clearly so, but not all the time, which obviously worried him, hence the act. He preferred people to be puzzled rather than contemptuous. This, above all, appeared to Trillian to be generally stupid, but she could no longer be bothered to argue about it. She sighed, punched up a star map on the busy screen so she could make it simple for him. Whatever his reasons for wanting to be that way. There, she said, right there. Hey, yeah, said Zaphod. Well, what? Parts of the inside of her head scrambled at the other parts of the inside of her head. She said very calmly, it's the same sector you originally picked me up in. He looked at her and then looked back at the screen. Hey, yeah, now that is wild. We should have zapped straight into the middle of the Horsehead Nebula. How did we come here? I mean, that's nowhere. She ignored this. Improbability drive, she said patiently. You explained it to me yourself. We pass through every point in the universe. You know that. Yeah, but that's one wild coincidence, isn't it? Yes. Picking someone up at that point out of the whole universe to choose from, that's just too... I want to work on this. Computer! The serious cybernetics ship computer, which controlled and permeated every particle of the ship, switched into communication mode. Hi there, it said brightly, and simultaneously spewed out a tiny ribbon of ticker tape just for the record. The ticker tape said, Hi there. Oh, God, said Zaphod. He hadn't worked with this computer for long, and he had already learned to loathe it. The computer continued, brash and cheery, as if it were selling detergent. I want you to know that whatever your problem is, I'm here to help. Yeah, said Zaphod. Look, I think I'll just use a piece of paper. Sure thing, said the computer, spilling out the message into a waste bin at the same time. I understand. If you ever want... Shut up, said Zaphod, snatching up the pencil. He sat down next to Trillian at the console. Okay, said the computer in a hurt tone of voice, and closed down its speech channel again. Zaphod and Trillian pored over the figures that the improbability flight path scanner flashed silently up in front of them. Can we work it out? Said Zaphod. From their point of view, what was the improbability of their rescue was? Yes, that's a constant. 2 to the power of 276,709 against 1. That's high. They're 2 lucky guys. Yes. Relative to what we were doing when the ship picked them up, Trillian punched up the figures. They showed 2 to the power of infinity minus 1 to 1 against, and a rational number that has only a conventional meaning in the improbability drive. It's pretty low, continued Zaphod with a slight whistle. Yes, agreed Trillian, and looked at him quizzically. That's one big whack of improbability to be accounted for. Something pretty improbable has got to show up on the balance sheet if it's all going to add up to a nice, pretty sum.
Zaphod scribbled a few sums, crossed them out, threw the pencil away.
Bats, dots, I can't work it out.
Well? Zaphod knocked his two heads together in irritation, gritted his teeth.
Okay, computer.
The voice circuit sprang to life again.
Why, hello there,
they said, ticker tape, ticker tape.
All I want to do is make your day nice and nicer and nice. Yeah, well, shut up and work something out for me. Sure thing, shouted the computer. You want a probability forecast based on improbability data. Yeah, okay. Here's an interesting fact, a little notion. Did you realize that most people's lives are governed by telephone numbers?
A pained look crawled across one of Zaphod's faces, and then the other one.
Have you flipped? No, but when I will tell you then.
Trillian gasped. She scrabbled at the buttons of the improbability flight path number.
Telephone number, she said. Did that thing say telephone number?
The computer paused politely, but it now continued.
What I was about to say, that don't bother, please, said Trillian. Look, what is it? Said Zaphod. I don't know. But those aliens, they're on their way up to the bridge with that wretched robot. Can we pick them up in any of the monitor cameras?
Oh, what do you guys? Oh, Hogwarts? Yeah. Don't look at me. I don't have that in the budget, and doesn't look like a type of game I'm a big fan of. So that would be all you. But if you guys get it, I will be happy to sit there and watch you guys play it as well. It's just not my style of game. But it might be a den stream. Oh, we like den streams. Bring them on. Den streams are fun streams. You don't think you'd be brave enough to play it on stream? Oh, I don't know. You could play it on stream if you wanted to, Crow. I don't think anybody would care too much. I honestly didn't think I was going to be of the opinion to actually sit here and try and read a book on stream, but, people have been enjoying it. So, yes, Cotton has been. Cotton's been having a blast at it, too, from what I've seen. And you know what? Since we have like 30 seconds here real quick, since I've stopped between a chapter, let's do a couple of things real quick. I am going to do some real quiet shout outs real quick. So we're going to do a little bit more traditional Twix with no shout out overlays, just because I can. And so we will do them based on my memory of the people that were here. So we'll start with the illustrious Swifty Squirrel. Really? Oh. There it goes. There we go. There's a Swifty Squirrel came in earlier. It's creator of the Wizarding World. Yeah, well, okay. Well, Crow, I'll be honest with you. I think Wars was, last time I was doing this, Wars was getting a bunch of work done herself. So you would not be the only one. All right. And so after that, then there was the ever popular and dear friend of ours, Wars HQ. Why is that? Yeah, and all of those other commands are turned off right now. Yeah, I know. It's the stupidest thing in the world. Why do I have to wait to do my own? All right. You know what? That's okay. That's all right. Actually, I think I can still trigger this. Yeah, there it is. I can still trigger this. Ah. Hey, Alan, welcome on in. There we go. Serious Wars. And then that. That Crodo. Let's see if I got that right. Yep. And then ice. Oh, that's a Wars in Crow clip. And then there's a Zai Zai who's also hanging out. And then we have the lovely Oof. There we go. And then Cotton Fire. Avid Valheim streamer. Good. I enjoy watching her streams. You should check her out. She's also been doing a bit of Hogwarts Legacy, so you might catch her doing some of that as well. Fun stuff. And then I'll let that one go through. And I think this is going to be, I think this is all of the ones that I have seen come through here. Oh, the fabulous people. Sorry, I haven't been doing a whole lot of these, and I turned off all the auto shout-outs because we're right in the middle of a book, and while I'm reading a chapter, I would hate to have that interrupted. So. And then Lightning Hound. Yes. Okay, so I think I've gotten everybody who's stopped in for a visit. Wonderful to have you guys here. I hope that you are enjoying the book. It's one of my favorite books, and I have been enjoying rereading it again for probably, I think, the 30th time now or something like that. It's some ridiculous number. I've read this book enough times. But Cotton, this is really meant to just be a real lurking stream. We got about another 20 minutes, so probably another chapter, depending on how short this next chapter is. Well, we'll probably get another 2. Well, we're in the series of like short chapters, so we'll get another like 2 or 3 more chapters, but another 20 more minutes, and then we'll be finishing it out. Oh no, where's this computer just died? Unfortunate. So we get her full and undivided attention for a bit. That's all right. I am fixing to stick my head back in here and go back to reading. So, but yeah, well, the next couple chapters are really short, so we'll probably bang those ones out, and then we'll be about done. But yeah, it's the reading stream is only about 2 hours long. But people seem to like it, so I don't know. I would call this ASMR Lightning. It's just reading a story. Wags and Keisha were big hip on it, and they were like, it'll help us sleep. And so they started a train of people that were like, yes, do a reading stream. And so we did one on Sunday and had enough people come back and rewatch the VOD over and over again that it was the popular VOD for the week. And I actually outpaced some of my other streams. And so I'm like, okay, well, we'll continue the reading stream for a bit longer and we'll see what people think. So here we are, chapter 13. Marvin trudged on down the corridor, still moaning. And then, of course, I've got this terrible pain in my diodes down my left side. No, said Arthur grimly as he walked alongside. Really? Oh, yes, said Marvin. I mean, I've asked them to replace it, but no one ever listens. I can imagine. Vague whistling and humming noises were coming from Ford. Well, he kept saying to himself, Zaphod Beeblebrox. Suddenly, Marvin stopped and held up its hand. You know what's about to happen now, of course. No, what? Said Arthur, who didn't want to know. We've arrived at another of those doors. It was a sliding door that let itself into the side of the corridor. Marvin eyed it suspiciously. Well, said Ford impatiently, do we go through? Do we go through? Mimicked Marvin. Yes, this is the entrance to the bridge, and I was told to take you to the bridge, and probably the highest demand that will be made of my intellectual capacities today, and I shouldn't wonder. Slowly, with great loathing, he stepped towards the door, like a hunter stalking his prey. Suddenly, it slid open. Thank you, it said. We're making a simple door, so very happy. Deep in Marvin's thorax gears ground. Funny, he intoned to Funeral. How just when you think life can't possibly get any worse, it suddenly does. He heaved himself through the door and left Ford and Arthur standing on the other side, shrugging their shoulders. From inside, they heard Marvin's voice again. I suppose you'll want to see the aliens now. Do you want me to sit in a corner and rest, or just fall apart where I'm standing? Yeah, just show them in, would you, Marvin? Came another voice. Arthur looked at Ford and was astonished to see him laughing. What? Shh, said Ford. Come on in. He stepped through and into the bridge. Arthur followed him nervously and was astonished to see a man lolling back in a chair with his feet on a control console, picking the teeth of his right-hand head with his left hand. The right-hand head seemed to be thoroughly preoccupied with the task, but the left-hand one was grinning a broad, relaxed, and nonchalant grin. The number of things that Arthur couldn't believe he was seeing was fairly large. His jaw flopped about at a loose end for a while. The particular man waved a lazy wave at Ford with an appalling affectation of nonchalance. Ford! Hi, how are you? Glad you could drop in. Ford was not going to be out-cooled. Zaphod, great to see you. You're looking good. The extra arm suits you so nice. A ship as you've stolen. Arthur just goggled at him. You mean you know this guy? He said, waving a wild finger at Zaphod. Know him? Exclaimed Ford. He paused, decided the introductions were the better way around this. Oh, Zaphod, this is a friend of mine, Arthur Dent. He said, I saved him from this planet that blew up. Oh, sure, said Zaphod. Hi, Arthur, glad you could make it. His right hand looked around casually, said hi, and then went back to waving and having its teeth picked. Ford carried on.
And Arthur, this is my semi-cousin, Zaphod Beeble.
We've met, said Arthur sharply. When you're cruising down the road in the fast lane and you lazily sail past a few hard-driving cars and are feeling pretty pleased with yourself, then accidentally change lanes from fourth to first instead of third, plus from fourth to third instead of third, thus making your engine leap out of your hood in a rather ugly mess, it tends to throw you off your stride in much the same way this remark threw Ford Prefect off his.
What?
He said.
I said, we've met.
Zaphod gave an awkward start of surprise and jabbed a gummy sharp.
Hey, have we? Hey,
Ford rounded on Arthur with an angry flash in his eyes. Now he felt he was back on home ground. He suddenly began to resent having lumbered himself with this ignorant primitive who knew as much about the affairs of Galaxy as an Ilford-based gnat knew about the life of Peking.
What do you mean you've met?
He demanded.
This is Zaphod Beeblebrox from Beetlejuice 5. You know, not bloody Martian Smith from Crodon.
I don't care, said Arthur coolly.
We've met, haven't we, Zaphod Beeblebrox? Or should I say, Phil?
What? Shouted Ford.
You'll have to remind me. I've a terrible memory for species.
It was at a party.
Yeah, well, I don't doubt that.
Cool it, will you, Arthur? Demanded Ford. Arthur would not be deterred. A party 6 months ago on Earth, England. Zaphod shook his head with a tight-lipped smile. London, insisted Arthur. Islington.
Oh,
said Zaphod with a guilty start.
That party.
This wasn't fair on Ford at all. He looked backwards and forwards between Arthur and Zaphod.
What?
He said to Zaphod.
You don't mean to say you've been to that miserable little planet, have you? No, of course not, said Zaphod. Well, I may have just dropped in briefly, on my way somewhere. But I've been stuck there for 15 years.
Well, I didn't know that, now did I?
But what were you doing there? Looking about,
He gate-crashed a party, said Arthur, trembling with anger. A fancy dressed party.
It would have to be, wouldn't it?
At this party, persisted Arthur, was a girl. Oh, well, look, it doesn't matter now. The whole place has gone up in smoke anyways.
I wish you'd stop sulking about that bloody planet. Who was the lady?
Oh, just somebody. Well, all right. I wasn't doing very well with her. I've been trying all evening. Hell, she was something beautiful.
Charming, devastating, intelligent. At last I'd got to her to myself for a bit and was plying her with a bit of talk when this friend of yours barges up and says, "Hey, doll, this guy boring you? Why don't you talk to me instead? I'm from a different planet."
I never saw her again.
Zaphod.
Yeah? Said Arthur, glaring at him, trying not to feel foolish.
He only had the 2 arms and the 1 head and called himself Bill. But you must admit, he did turn out to be from another planet.
Excuse me.
But you must admit, he did turn out to be from another planet, she said.
As she wandered into the sight at the other end of the bridge, she gave Arthur a pleasant smile, which settled on him like a ton of bricks. This then turned her attention to the ship's controls again. There was silence for a few seconds, and then out of the scrambled mess of Arthur's brain crawled some words.
Tricia McMillan,
he said. What are you doing here?
Same as you, she said. I hitched a ride. After all, with a degree in math and another in astrophysics, what else is there to do? It was either that or dole the queue again on Monday. Infinity -1, chattered the computer. Improbability sum now complete. Zaphod looked about him, at Ford, at Arthur, and then at Trillian. Trillian, he said, is this sort of thing going to happen every time we use that improbability drive? Very probable, I'm afraid, she said. And I know, my female voice sucks. Get over it. Chapter 14. The heart of gold fled on silently through the night of space. Now, on conventional photon drives, its crew of 4 were ill at ease, knowing that they had been brought together, not out of their own volition, or by simple coincidence, by some curious perversion of physics, as if relationships between people were susceptible to the same laws that govern the relationship between atoms and molecules. As the ship's artificial night closed in, they were each grateful to retire to separate cabins and try to rationalize their thoughts. Trillian couldn't sleep. She sat on the couch and stared at a small cage which contained her last and only links with Earth. 2 white mice that she had insisted Zaphod let her bring. She had expected never to see the planet again, but she was disturbed by her negative reaction to the news of the planet's destruction. It seemed remote and unreal, and she could find no thoughts to think about it. She watched the mice scurry around the cage and running furiously in their little plastic tread wheels, till they occupied her whole attention. Suddenly, she shook herself and went back to the bridge to watch over the tiny flashing lights and figures that charted the ship's progress through the void. She wished she knew what it was she was trying not to think about. No, my numb voice is not going to be female. Zaphod couldn't sleep. He also wished he knew what it was that he wouldn't let himself think about. For as long as he can remember, he'd suffered from a vague nagging feeling of being not all there. Most of the time, he was able to put this thought aside and not worry about it. But it had been reawakened by the sudden, inexplicable arrival of Ford Prefect and Arthur Dent. Somehow it seemed to confirm to a pattern that he could not see. Ford couldn't sleep. He was too excited about being back on the road again. 15 years of virtual imprisonment were over. Just as he was about to finally begin to give up hope, knocking about with Zaphod for a bit promised to be a lot of fun. There seemed to be something faintly odd about his semi-cousin that he couldn't put his finger on. The fact that he had become president of the galaxy was frankly astonishing. As was the manner of his leaving the post. Was there a reason behind it? There would be no point in asking Zaphod. He never appeared to have a reason for anything he did at all. He had turned unfathomability into an art form. He attacked everything in life with a mixture of extraordinary genius and naive incompetence, and it was often difficult to tell which was which. Arthur slept. He was terribly tired. There was a tap at Zaphod's door. It slid open. Zaphod? Yeah. Trillian stood outlined in the oval of light. I think we just found what you came to look for. Hey, yeah! Ford gave up the attempt on sleep in the corner of his cabin gave up his attempt on sleep. In the corner of his cabin was a small computer screen and a keyboard. He sat at it for a while and tried to compose a new entry for the guide on the subject of bogons, but couldn't think of anything vitriolic enough, so he gave up too, wrapped the robe around himself, and went for a walk to the bridge. As he entered, he was surprised to see 2 figures hunched excitedly over the instruments. See? The ship's about to move into orbit, said Trillian. There's a planet out there. It's at the exact coordinates you predicted. Zaphod heard a noise and looked up. Ford! Yes. Hey, come take a look at this. Ford went and had a look. It was a series of figures flickering over a screen. You recognize those galactic coordinates? No. I'll give you a clue. Computer! Hi, gang, enthused the computer. This is getting real sociable, isn't it? Shut up, said Zaphod, and show up the screens. Light on the bridge sank. Pinpoints of light played across the consoles and reflected in 4 pairs of eyes that stared up at the external monitor screens. There was absolutely nothing on them. Recognize that? Whispered Zaphod. Ford frowned. No, he said. What do you see? Nothing. Recognize it? What are you talking about? We're in the Horsehead Nebula, one whole vast dark cloud. And I was meant to recognize that from a blank screen? Inside a dark nebula is the only place in the galactic galaxy where you see a dark screen. Very good. Zaphod laughed. He was clearly excited about something, almost childishly so. Hey, this is terrific. This is just far too much. What's so great about being stuck in a dust cloud? Said Ford. What you reckon to find here? Nothing. No stars, no planets, no. Computer, shouted Zaphod. Rotate angle of vision through 180 degrees and don't talk about it. For a moment, it seemed that nothing was happening. Then a brightness glowed on the edge of the huge screen. A red star the size of a small plate crept across it, followed quickly by another one. A binary system. Then a vast crescent sliced into the corner of the picture, a large red glare shading away into deep black, the night side of a planet. I've found it, cried Zaphod, thumping the console. I've found it. Ford stared in astonishment. What is it? He said. That, said Zaphod, is the most improbable planet that ever existed.
And Wars, I'm glad you love the gnome, but I don't see the gnome coming back anytime soon. We'll see. Chapter 15. Excerpt from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, page 634,784, section 5A. Entry: Magrathea. Far back in the mists of ancient time, in the great and glorious days of the former galactic empire, life was wild, rich, and largely tax-free. Mighty starships plied their way between exotic suns, seeking adventure and rewards among the farthest reaches of the galactic space. In those days, spirits were brave, the stakes were high, men were real men, women were real women, and small furry creatures from Alpha Centauri were real small furry creatures from Alpha Centauri. And all dared to brave unknown terrors, to do mighty deeds, to boldly split infinities that no man had split before, and thus the empire was forged. Many men, of course, became extremely rich, but this was perfectly natural and nothing to be ashamed of, because no one was really poor, at least no one worth speaking of. And for all the richest and most successful merchants, life inevitably became rather dull and niggly. And they began to imagine that this was therefore the fault of the worlds they'd settled on. None of them were entirely satisfactory. Either the climate wasn't quite right in the latter part of the afternoon, or the day was half an hour too long, or the sea was exactly the wrong shade of pink. And thus were created the conditions for a staggeringly new form of specialty industry, custom-made luxury planet building. The home of this industry was the planet Magrathea,
where hyperspatial engineers sucked matter through white holes in space to form it into dream planets. Gold planets, platinum planets, soft rubber planets with lots of earthquakes, all lovingly made to the exacting standards that the galaxy's richest men naturally came to expect. But so successful was this venture that Magrathea itself became the richest planet of all time, and the rest of the galaxy was reduced to abject poverty. And so the system broke down, the empire collapsed, and a long, sullen silence settled over 1 billion hungry worlds, disturbed only by the pen scratchings of scholars as they labored into the night over smug little treatises on the value of planned political economy. Magrathea itself disappeared, and its memories soon passed into the obscurities of legend. In these enlightened days, of course, no one believes a word of it. And that is where we are going to retire for tonight. That is the end of chapter 15 of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We will pick up chapter 16 on Sunday, where we will, well, Sunday my time. I think it's Monday for Wars and company down in Australia. The schedules are up in Twitch, so you'll be able to catch this. We will do this every Sunday until we finish the book, at least. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. I was like, oh, I should hit the ending screen, but all my buttons are all turned off and everything else. So, yes, Crow, for you is Monday. You are in the time zone where you're actually in the future, so you have to wait for the past to catch up. But my schedule is up on the Twitch channel, so you can go see and catch up there if you like. I am going to see if, yeah, here we go. Let's do it this way. Silly Crow. Silly Crow, book readings are for kids. No, I'm just kidding. There we go. No, don't do that. Every now and again, it's like, hey, I just want a thing to do the thing correctly and go looking for it. So we are going to send a raid out. We're going to go find somebody to raid. I hope you all enjoyed the stories. We will be... There we go. Okay, and in honor of us returning back to the shores of Denmark for our Chaos Stream weekend this weekend, we are going to go and catch up with, I think, Red Fairy, who's also doing a little bit of Valheiming right now. She, like Wars and Crow, is an Australian streamer, so you might have a little fun and have some things to talk with, but nice enough lady, plenty of good funds. Somebody we've rated before in the past. So we'll just send some more their direction. So until Saturday or Sunday for Crow and Wars, take care. Have a good day. Have a good night. Have an enjoyable time zone. And we will catch you all next time. South Australian, yes. They're somewhere over there. Take care.